Hi, I'm Cheryl and welcome to my sewing room. I get a lot of viewer questions on a variety of subjects. One of them is how to do quilting stitches. They're a raw beginner, they're not sure how to get started. So in this video, I don't care if you're a raw beginner or you've been doing quilting stitches for a while, I think you're going to all get something out of it. So I'm going to take you from the very basic of all basic quilting stitches, stitch in the ditch, all the way up to how to create your own decorative stitch pattern designs. You don't need a fancy sewing machine to do this. You could use your grandmother's sewing machine. In fact, I'm talking about my grandmother's sewing machine, which was a long time ago. So let's get started. In order for your quilting stitches to come out as nice as possible, I highly recommend you use a walking presser foot. If you do not have one, they are easy to get. You could go to a sewing machine supply store or sewing machine supply website. Another good place is Amazon.com. Just enter the name of your sewing machine and model and that you want a walking presser foot. This presser foot helps to keep the layers of your fabric from shifting apart. All of the fabric flows evenly underneath the presser foot. If you use a standard presser foot, the fabric will shift and stretch, and also you might get little pin tucks in your fabric. Here's how you would layer your fabrics for any project that you're doing. You would put the fabric for the very back of your project front side down. Then lay your cotton batting on top and then place your quilt or your pot holder, whatever your project is, center that over this fabric here. You want anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inches. If you're doing a large quilt, you may want to have 2 inches because, like I said, the walking foot isn't perfect. You might still get some stretching, but you'll get a lot less stretching if you use that walking foot. Once you have everything smooth, make sure this fabric on the back is smooth and that the fabric on the top is smooth. Then pin all your layers together. Now I'm using straight pins here. If it's a small project, a pot holder, a placemat, and even some table runners, I just use straight pins. But if it's a large project, I would use safety pins, because otherwise if you're doing a quilt, these straight pins are going to start poking and jabbing you, and you're not going to like that very well. But if it's small, I would just use the straight pins. Another thing that some quilters like to do when they're making a large quilt is they do large hand basting stitches through all of the layers. Now, I stopped doing that years ago when I lost the use of my right hand because it was just too hard and too time consuming. I found that pinning is just as good as basting, but it's just a matter of opinion and what you are comfortable with doing. If you're a beginner, you have never done this before, I highly recommend you start with stitch in the ditch. And the ditch is where the two pieces of fabric come together. So it's right in the seams here. So this is a placemat that I did, and I stitched around it all of the lines in here out throughout the star, and then the seams connecting the stripes all the way down. And then I did just a little edging stitch around a straight stitch all the way around the raw edges. This is really simple to do. This is a Christmas quilt, and I used fat quarters and cut up a bunch of squares and threw this all together. I wanted something quick, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time doing quilting stitches, so I did stitch in the ditch. I started at one end, went all the way down from top to bottom, all the way across, then I turned the quilt and started again. start at and then stitching side to side. So you're covering all sides of the square. One of the reasons why I chose Stitch in the Ditch is that on the back, this is fleece, and it has a very busy pattern on it, and I didn't want a real decorative stitch pattern on it. That was another reason why I chose Stitch in the Ditch. So if you have a definite pattern on the back, take that into consideration when you are deciding on which type of quilting stitch to do. The next type of stitch pattern that I recommend you do is, it's a step up from Stitch in the Ditch, is just doing straight lines of stitching. They could be anywhere from 2 to 3 inches apart. So you would start at the top, stitch down, all the way across, then turn it, and then stitch down the other direction. You can also do it even on a round pot holder or a round placemat. This is just a straight stitch pattern. One of the things you can do to help keep yourself on a straight line, now I just eyeball things. I just have a good eye for keeping the same distance. But some people don't. It's very hard for them. So here's an option that you can do. There is a little bar that comes with a lot of walking feet. At least it did with mine. Mine is for a Viking sewing machine. And there's a hole back here, and you stick this bar in there and you pull it out however wide you want your stitches apart. So this is maybe set at 2.5 inches. I pulled it out, and I would just look at my guide bar. Don't look at your needle. Look at the guide bar and keep this little bar here right over the top. And then you go to do the next one and you do the same thing. Another thing that I've heard people like to do is they like to use tape. Now you can buy tape that is specific to fabric, and you could use a low glue masking tape. I think it's like that blue tape. The problem with tape is that I have a problem with it just coming off while I'm stitching. Other people have really good luck with it. So look at your different options and try to find the one that works best for you. Another stitch pattern is stitching on a diagonal using a straight stitch. You would start in the corner and work your way down towards the other corner. This is if you're working on a square. If you're working on something larger, for instance, let's pretend this is really large. You would just come over here X number of inches that you want and begin stitching at a diagonal pattern. You could put little pencil marks along there where you want to start each line. It is a little more difficult to handle your fabric when you're going at a diagonal, but not that difficult that you couldn't achieve it. And remember, you can use your little bar on your walking foot, push it in where you want it to be, and then use that to get nice straight lines. Remember, don't look at your needle, look at the bar. This is a toaster cover in which I chose to use straight line of stitching on a diagonal. These are very close together on the front. They're probably 1 inch apart. And then on the side, they're probably maybe 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches. So don't be afraid to try these patterns on a lot of different projects. They are achievable. So if you want to start doing diagonal stitching, start on a small project. This is a contemporary pattern. I use this on very small projects such as pot holders and placemats. You can make these lines as far apart as you want. And what you do is you start at the side, you come in however many inches you want to start, stitch down to the corner, leave your needle down, lift up that presser foot, turn it, then lower the presser foot and continue stitching. You would do that all the way around. Now I'm almost back where I started, but I'm going to stop whatever the number of inches I want these lines apart. So stop, needle down, lift up the presser foot, turn your project, lower the presser foot, and keep stitching around and around until you get to the center. Now here is a sample of it on a pot holder. They're a little bit wider apart. They're maybe 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. Again, start at the bottom corner, come in however many inches you want to start, and then just continue stitching all the way around. This goes very, very quick. And another thing I do is I just often eyeball it, but remember, if you have a problem doing that, either use the little bar on your walking foot or use tape. This is a serpentine stitch. A lot of your sewing machines have decorative stitches on it, and this is my favorite. I use this on many of my different projects, whether it's a pot holder, a placemat, table runner, or a large quilt. I use this a lot. I still use the other stitches, but this is my favorite. So when you're doing a decorative stitch pattern, and you need to practice with it first before you start putting it on any of your projects. Practice on some scrap fabric, because when you're doing decorative stitches, this goes back and forth. Okay? So it's harder to stay the same distance apart. So a tip on how to do that is don't look at your needle at all. Whatever you do, don't look at your needle. If you're using the bar, try to keep the bar where it's somewhat close in this pattern here, so that it doesn't wobble out of it. Another thing that I like to do is I will look at the side of my presser foot and my previous stitch line, and I try to keep the same distance when I'm doing it. So remember, don't look at the needle. So you would approach doing this the same way as the straight stitch. You stitch down one side all the way across top to bottom, then turn it and do the same thing. Now, if you want to do it on a corner, a diagonal, start in the center, especially if it's a pot holder. I always start in the center on pot holders. Go straight down corner to corner, then go over and do your stitches, and then go over to the other side. Then you would turn it and go down the center again, so that when you're done, it looks like this. So this is a really pretty stitch pattern. Also, you can do it on round pot holders and placemats. Now these lines are a little closer together because this is a small project. Here is a maple leaf pot holder, and I used the serpentine stitch on this. I made them a little closer together than what you saw in that sample, but again, start in the corner and work your way out. This is also, because it's got a lot of squares, you could do stitch in the ditch on this one also. This is the 10-minute table runner. And don't forget, you can do decorative stitching on the 10-minute table runner. I know a lot of the videos out there on YouTube don't show you what all you can do with the 10-minute table runner, but there is a lot you can do. So on this, in this centerpiece here, after this was all stitched together, I did the serpentine stitch on a diagonal. Then after I finished doing that, I did stitch in the ditch up here at the top, and then I did stitch in the ditch all the way around here. So don't forget to use decorative stitching when you're working on the 10-minute table runner. I do a lot of panel fabric projects. They're quick, so easy to do, and there's just beautiful panel fabrics out there. You can finish up things really, really quick. This is a pillow panel. You can do some simple decorative stitching on this just to make this piece here really stand out. You could do that straight line of stitching at a diagonal going across, okay, and then go the other way. You could also use the serpentine stitch and go at a diagonal on that also. Then you could stitch a straight stitch around the square, and this makes this portion here really pop out. Another really simple decorative stitching to do is something that I like to call an echo stitch. You know, when you throw a rock into a pond, you'll see little round circles coming out around the pebble as the water flows outward. That's what I mean by an echo stitch. So here's a really simple applique pattern, and the first stitch line that I did was around the very edge of this, okay, because I really wanted this to sit down. Then I went out about 1/2 inch and then did an echo stitch, okay. One of the things that I like to use, again, is using the side of my presser foot as the guide as to how far to stay away, okay? So this is one sample of an echo stitch. Here's another echo stitch. I didn't just do one line out, I did 2. And this adds a real decorative piece to a simple project like this. This is a Shamrock Applique. So think about any applique patterns you're creating and then do a simple echo stitch. Here is Sunbonnet Sue. I went all the way out on this one. And then this is one of my favorites. I did this flower, and look at all the echo stitches that I did on it. Here is another pillow panel fabric. So if you saw something like this and you wanted to buy it, here's a suggestion to do how to do some really simple stitching techniques on it to make this centerpiece really pop. So what you would do is start in the center and stitch. You could either do a couple of echo stitches out, or I would just stitch close to the deer and stitch around it, okay? Doesn't have to be exact, but just stitch all around it. Then go out to the very edge of the green line around the circle and stitch all the way around it. So doing just this simple little pattern helps this little design pop. If you've been doing quilting stitches for a while and you're ready to move on to something else, here is a repetitive stitch pattern that you can easily create yourself on just paper and do this all over your project. These are hearts, okay? They're connected by a line going through the center, and I did 3 rows of this on this table runner. Let me show you briefly how to do it. Now, if you're interested in learning more about this, I have a video that the link is appearing right now in the upper right-hand corner, because I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, just a little bit to kind of give you an idea of what to expect. Here's some paper that I folded a bunch of times, okay. Then I stuck the heart on it and traced around it. Then I drew a line straight down there and a line straight down here. Went to the sewing machine, took the thread out of the needle. You can leave your bobbin thread in, but take the thread out of the needle and stitch right over all of these lines. And when you unfold it, you will have perforated lines all the way across. Now, it's hard to see on camera, but this pattern repeats all the way down the strip of paper. So then you would take your project that you want to put it on and lay it on your fabric, pin it down, and then stitch on the perforated lines. Like I said, the video goes into a lot more detail. It also shows you how to do some diamond shapes and whatever kind of shapes you want. So if you like to draw, then this is something maybe you're going to want to attempt. I hope this video was helpful to you. Now, if you like this video, please click on the old thumbs up button, and also click on share to share this video with your friends. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click on that red subscribe button down there in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Then enter your email address and then click on the little bell so that you receive email notifications. If you're not receiving the email notifications, then you need to go to your cell phone or your iPad or tablet and go into Settings, look for Notifications button, and push it to on. Then you'll start receiving the notifications. I'm Cheryl. This is Manny. So glad you came to my sewing room. We'll see you next time, and happy sewing!